Welcome to the Next Level Human podcast. As a human, you have a job to do. In fact, you have 4 jobs: to earn and manage money, to attain and maintain health and fitness, to build and sustain personal relationships, to find meaning and make a difference. None of these jobs are taught in school, and that is what this podcast is designed to do. To educate us all on living our most fulfilled lives through the mastery of these 4 jobs. I'm your host, Dr. Jade Teta, and I believe we are here living this life for 3 reasons and 3 reasons only: to learn, to teach, and to love. In this podcast, I will be learning, teaching, and loving right along with you. I'm grateful to have your company. Here's to our next level. Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about authenticity. This is a topic that I think gets a lot of play in self-development, personal development, self-help. We are always hearing, be authentic, be true to yourself, right? And I'm going to present today a little bit different way of thinking about authenticity, because let's take an example of ourselves, let's say when we're teenagers, just say. And the way that we are being as a teenager certainly is not the way that we would hope to be or want to be as an adult. And so if we stay authentic to our teenage self, we are not going to be able to mature and become an adult, are we? And so in a sense, when we talk about the idea of authenticity and being true to yourself, we have to kind of ask the question, what exactly is being true to oneself? Because obviously there are elements of a human, some of our personality that stays with us from the time we're children to teenagers to adult. And we also know that there are many, perhaps most of the elements of our personality change pretty dramatically. I think we would also say that to have someone who is still behaving and being authentic to themselves, especially if they are not the best behaved or perhaps a little bit arrogant or not as smart or not as wise, obviously we want to be able to change. So being authentic to a lesser version or a more immature version of ourselves is definitely a problem. And to me, this is partly what happens to us as adults. What we tend to do as we grow is we get very entrenched in who we are. I like this thing. I don't like that thing. This is the kind of foods that I eat. I don't eat these kind of foods. I don't like this and I do like that. This is my type of romantic partner that I like. These are the kind of jobs I would see myself doing. We get very rigid in the view of ourselves. This is really tough because when you think about it, right? Think about the best times in our lives. Let's take the age from 15 to 30 years old, for those of you who are older than 30. And for those of you who aren't, just bear with me because this will be useful for you sort of later on. But think about that, right? Think about when you first become a teenager, 15 years old. Most of us are freshmen in high school. Think about all of that freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year of high school, all the learning that's going on, the different clubs, the different sports, the different people that you're exposed to, the different ideas that you're exposed to. And then, of course, high school ends, and maybe you've had a romantic experience and fallen in love. Maybe you haven't, but certainly college is coming for many people not. But you're going to have your first loves and your first heartbreaks. You're going to oftentimes gain friends and lose friends. Perhaps you're going to travel. You're going to have lots and lots of different experiences. And then what happens as you get a little bit older is you become very entrenched in a particular way of being, and life becomes very structured and rudimentary and sort of just a repeated process of the same things over and over. I oftentimes refer to this as prom, marriage, kids, PMK. It's basically this idea that many people are following a narrative. And of course, when they're going through the first part, it's sort of like, hey, we're in high school. The first big thing to show that high school's over and we're moving on to the next phase of our lives is prom, sort of the culmination of our high school experience. And many people look forward to that. Many people even plan to lose their virginity around that, as silly as that sounds. But prom is something that people tend to look forward to. And then, of course, it's about marriage, and sometimes we stop along the way to get a degree maybe, but that's the goal, right? Find the quote one, this sort of story that we tell ourselves, and then it's kids. And then from there, it's like, well, what do you do then? You're just living this life. And between the ages of 15 and 30 years old, there's lots of change, there's lots of challenge, there's lots of growth, there's lots of new ideas, there's a becoming. And then what happens is we stop becoming, many of us, and settle into this person with very rigid belief systems about who we are, what we like, what we don't like, etc. And so if we're being authentic to that particular person, what we're essentially doing is we're essentially saying, this is me, for better or worse. I will not change. There's nothing else for me to do here, in a sense. Here is the problem with living this kind of, quote, authentic life, in a sense, is that ultimately, life is nothing if not change. There are only two certainties in life. One, that things are going to change, and two, that you are going to die. That is the bottom line. Those are the only two certainties in life. And the degree to which you resist change and don't change and stay authentic to an old self and not become a new self is the degree to which life will start to become very rigid and very structured and not as fulfilling. Now, this is my sort of take on this, and I want you to just consider this. So consider the fact when we talk about being authentic, what we really should be saying is we should be saying we want to be authentic to a better future self. So in a sense, a schism begins to happen when we start to look at the world in this way. We start to see, this is my old self, this is my current self, and I have a future self, a self that I could be. Now, this might start sounding familiar for those of you who have followed this podcast for a little while, because we have these different types of human, the base level human, the culture level human, and the next level human. The base level human being the type that wants to stay, sort of in their safe zone. They're all about safety and they're all about certainty. And one of their biggest factors that they seek is power. And we oftentimes talk about the idea that, of course, someone who would be afraid and seeks safety would want power, because power in their mind, true power, makes them in control of all their situations. So there's nothing left to fear, in a sense. And so base level types seek power. Culture level types seek popularity and pleasure. They want to be liked. They want to be seen. They want to immerse themselves in entertainment and distract themselves, in a sense. So many of us find ourselves stuck in a culture level way of thinking and being. And so we stay authentic to this culture level self, this particular person that the world sees a particular way and that we like the world seeing us that way. Many of us live our entire lives simply trying to get accolades from the outside world. We basically want popularity and we want pleasure. We entertain ourselves and distract ourselves with entertainment and food and drugs and sex and all this pleasure-seeking behavior, as well as being authentic to a person who essentially is all about trying to be liked, finding the right person, being around the right friends, being in the right job, making the money so that people outside of us look at us and say, oh, this is a worthwhile, successful person. Do we really want to be authentic to our culture level selves? When we are authentic to that particular individual, are we really actually being true to ourselves? Another way of looking at being true to ourselves would be looking at it from the next level point of view, that we're not chasing power and popularity and pleasure, but we're more seeking purpose. And in order to seek purpose, in order to be purposeful in life, we essentially have to be authentic to a future better self. And the future better self is our next level human selves. The whole name of this podcast, the whole idea behind this is that you are a unique person. You have a unique spiritual fingerprint, a unique purpose-driven life that when you are living your authentic purpose, not your authentic culture level self, but your authentic next level self, you bring something unique to the world that no one else on the planet can, that you are a unique fingerprint in the world, and that your signature strengths make a difference in a way that only you can. So shouldn't we, as humans, be trying to be authentic to that individual? Not being authentic to a past self, not being authentic to who we currently are, but instead being authentic to who we could be. My thought on this is that we should never strive to be and stay a former anything. I used to be a football player. I could care less about that now. I used to be what I would call a dumb jock. I could care less about that now. I used to be into bodybuilding. I could care less about that now. I used to be into the NFL and mixed martial arts and all these other things. I don't really care about that now. What I care about now is my better future self, an author, a teacher, someone who is engaged in trying to make a difference in the world, someone who shows up authentically as a seeker of my best level self. And this is what's really hard about this, right? Because when we think about being our true selves, we think about being fully realized. And I want to challenge us on that idea, because can we ever truly be realized? If life is nothing but change and challenge, and by the way, change and challenge are the operative words here. Those are the things that make life so enjoyable. That's the thing that makes us feel so engaged in life and makes us feel like we are actually living. Change and challenge, change and challenge. Well, guess what change and challenge do? They change us. They make us different. They point us in a direction. They teach us. They cause us to confront our fears and to deal with failures and help us develop knowledge and experience and wisdom. And that then brings us to an authentic, better self. It's very much like a hero's journey, really. You know, we talk about the hero's journey, and those of you who don't know, I'll go through it really quickly, but the hero's journey is this process of when going through your life where you are essentially being pushed along by this change and challenge to become a particular thing, to become your own hero. And what I would say your hero is someone who has realized their purpose, is living that purpose out in the real world, and is developing a purpose-driven life, a life that is defined by what they can give the world versus what they're getting out of the world. And to live this authentic self, you have to embrace this hero's journey. So let's go through this hero's journey really quickly, because from my perspective, this is what actually delivers us to our authentic self. In my mind, we need to stop thinking of the authentic self as the true self now. We should be thinking about the authentic self as the true self in the future. Our fully realized, purpose-driven self is our authentic self. And when we think about it from that perspective, we never actually truly arrive, do we? Because there's always going to be change and challenge. We are always going to be confronted with the next challenge or the next thing that will evolve us. And so, again, it's wrong to think even of purpose as something that is solid and steady. Purpose also evolves. And so think about what happens with the hero's journey. The hero's journey is a process by which you're going along, you're feeling steady. Let's say you're this culture level person who's lived the prom, marriage, kid life, and then something happens. A lightning strike moment. The hero's journey always disrupts the story and makes you question reality. If you've ever watched this in movies, Star Wars, The Matrix, Harry Potter, any good hero's journey starts with a story explosion, right? The story that we're living sort of explodes, and our reality, the reality we thought we knew, completely changes. Now, for us, this can be about losing a loved one, losing our job, dealing with financial crisis, dealing with heartbreak, having someone betray us, cheating and affairs. These are the kind of illnesses. These kinds of things shake up our lives. Now, once this happens in a hero's journey, once this lightning strike moment occurs in a hero's journey, we are set into a vortex of suffering in a sense. And I really mean it that way. We begin to suffer in a really difficult way because we've lost our footing. We've lost sense of our old authentic self, right? Think about it. Our old authentic self is someone who we see as solid. They're living a particular story. Now this lightning strike moment comes and completely throws that authentic self off their game, makes them feel on shaky ground, disrupts their entire reality. And from there, we start to suffer. We start to and we're suffering largely because we're stuck between two possibilities: the old self we just lost and the new self we could become. Now, this is where this authenticity conversation becomes most poignant, most important. If we try to hold on to the old authentic self and continue to go back to that old story and resist the change that is occurring, this is the degree that we oftentimes will suffer. Instead, if we ask ourselves, what is this teaching me? How can I use this to become somebody else, something different, someone more purposeful? We've talked about this idea of suffering is a source of growth. Pain is a path to purpose. This is part of the whole idea behind the hero's journey. In this struggle, in this suffering after this lightning strike moment, you will be learning. This is the change and challenge that I'm talking about. This is the engagement in life. Now, of course, it's uncomfortable while it's going on, but when we look back on those times when we are in these uncomfortable, engaged, change and challenge times in our lives, these are the times we are most sort of nostalgic for. These are the times that we say, that was a great time in my life. And the reason why is we may have been sad, we may have been unbalanced, we may have been all number of things, but one thing we were becoming. We were becoming somebody else. We were moving towards a better version of our current selves. This is hugely important, and in this struggling, we develop key insights. And this is another important part of the hero's journey. We get this lightning strike moment, we get this suffering that we go through, and then we start developing insights. And those insights point us to our new, better selves. And the degree to which we can get that insight is the degree to which we can see ourselves as someone else. I mean, think about it. As you're listening to this right now, how much of your high school self actually remains in you? How much of that high school self would you want to be? Would you really want to be authentic to that person? And how much of your new self is your purpose-driven self, or are you holding on to it? And I do think this is exactly what we do. We want to hold on to certain parts of ourselves that we are comfortable with and that we know. And we all know people like this that don't want to change their mind, that resist new stories, that, are introduced to a new potential romantic partner and they're just like, no, they're not my type. And they hold on to these very old ideas, trying to hold on to any semblance of their old authentic self versus becoming their new authentic self. When you get this insight in the hero's journey, and this insight can come in many number of ways. And I'll give you an example here. For me, one of my major insights was, here I am, a guy who's teaching metabolism and weight loss, and I'm an expert in this field. Yet my entire life, I've also been studying psychology and philosophy and taking self-help seminars and reading hundreds, if not thousands, of self-help books and articles and all of this kind of stuff. Even did counseling as a time. All of this was getting me prepared for my next authentic, next level self, the becoming of someone who would teach, write, and deliver content as a personal development teacher. Think about that for a second. Had I not gone through, some of you know my story, but some of my hero's journey, going through an affair, going through a divorce, looking at myself and seeing some of my shortcomings. If I tried to stay anchored to my old, authentic, arrogant, insecure, ignorant self, could I be who I currently am today and who I am to become later? Of course I could not. So this idea of staying authentic is not about staying authentic to somebody in the past or who we currently are. It's about knowing who our better future self is and staying authentic to that particular person. What happens is once we get that insight and we start to take action in the world on that new insight, we begin to see that we are completely different. How many of you have had this experience where you go off and you do a thing or you become something, you go through heartache and you do things and your view starts to change, and then you go back home and hang out with your old friends and old family and you see, oh my gosh, they see me exactly how I used to be, and I am not that person anymore. And even how many people fall back into being that person when they're around people who knew their old self. One of the things I always say is never engage with somebody and make them a friend or listen to anybody who sees you a way you're not or no longer wish to be. I personally do not like when I am around old friends and family who see me as the dumb jock that I once was. That to me is critically important. That's how I know you're an actual friend of mine, that you followed my journey the same way I followed my journey. I have friends that I've known since high school who see me exactly as I am today. I also have friends and family that see me exactly as I was. And the quality of my relationships with these people depends on how they see me. But more importantly, the quality of the relationship with myself depends entirely on me being authentic to my best future self, not my past self. This is critical. So let's drive this home with a couple more concepts here, and then we'll end the podcast today. Think about this as if life is a video game. And as you go through this video game, one of the games I played when I was a kid, and some of you may have heard this sort of analogy or metaphor, and I think it's a very good one. But one of the games I used to play as a kid was a game called Super Mario Brothers. And so some of you may know this game, some of you may not. But basically this was a game, I don't even remember the point of it, but I know you'd go through different levels and you were playing with this little Italian guy named Luigi, and he was supposed to run through and grab different mushrooms to level up and grab certain coins to get points, and he'd be confronted with different bosses and, people that could kill him. And at the end of every level, you would come up against a big boss that you would have to figure a way to beat. You'd have to come up with a particular sequence of moves, and you shoot a couple fireballs and do a flip and do a couple jumps, and you have to do just the right sequence of moves to get by this big boss. Otherwise, you'd have to repeat the entire level. Well, one of the things is, if you think about being authentic from this point of view, what if you approach that boss the same way every single time? You ran up, you shot a fireball, you spun around, and then you got killed. And you said, well, that didn't work, so let me try that again. And you go up and you shoot a fireball and you spin around and you get killed again. And you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. This to me is analogous of being authentic in the way most people talk about it, being, quote, true to yourself. To me, what you want to do is be true to who you are becoming. Every single time you run into a recurrent pattern in your life, or a recurrent emotion in your life, or a repeated obstacle in your life, it is an indication to you that you are trying to be authentic to someone who is no longer serving you. And don't people do this all of the time? We have a word for it, stubborn, right? A stubborn romantic partner, a stubborn family member, a person who you just simply cannot talk to because they will not behave any differently than they always have, and or they treat you the same even though you've changed. But more importantly, we do that ourselves. That's what we do. This is what keeps us stuck. So how do you know you're being inauthentic to your future better self. You know that you're being inauthentic or being authentic to a part of you that no longer serves you when you keep running into the same patterns, same obstacles, and the same emotions over and over again. And oftentimes when I'm in coaching, I'll tell you what happens here. It almost always is somebody who is stuck in pleasure seeking and popularity seeking. They will not give up the romantic type that they thought was their type. They will not give up the job that they thought they needed because they needed money. They will not give up the old stories that they think are going to make them a better person. They will not relinquish their old stories for the new possibilities that they could be. Think about it. You are potentially meant for something else. I never knew in a million years that I was going to be an author or that I would be sitting here talking to you and anyone would care about anything I had to say. I did not know that that would even be a possibility for me, except that I kept being authentic to my future self. I kept recognizing this is another pattern. It's up to me to change it. This is the same emotion. It's up to me to change it. Here's that same obstacle. I got to figure a way around it. And when I started thinking that way, I would beat the big boss in Super Mario Brothers, let's say, and I would never go back to being that particular human again. I am not as dishonest as I once was. Why would I want to be authentic to that person? I'm not as ignorant as I once was. Why would I want to be authentic to that person? I'm not as arrogant as I once was. Why would I want to be authentic to that person? I can love much deeper. Why do I want to be authentic to somebody who's not? I look at people differently. I no longer look at people for what their job is or how good looking they are or, popularity and pleasure seeking. I no longer want power. I am now very purpose driven and simply want to be here to learn and to teach and to love, to move myself into my better authentic way of being. Also realizing that this is an never ending process. And so the final thing I want to say here that I think is absolutely critical, couple episodes back, I did an episode on the honor code. And one of the things about that honor code process and practice is that essentially what you're doing is you are defining a new, better, next level self to be authentic to. It's very easy to say, I want to be a thing, right? I want to be this other person. But to be a thing, you have to act. You have to take the actions. Being is impossible. You cannot think and be. You have to act, think, feel. Act, think, feel. That is being. And in order to do that, you got to go out in the world and engage as this new person. So when you have this new honor code, this new intention to be different, this is what you must be authentic to. You have to stop being authentic to your old self and start being fully authentic to this new person. So what I would do if this is resonating with you is I would go back and listen to the honor code episode, complete that practice, and then realize that I need to be authentic to that particular person, to be seeking purpose, not popularity, not pleasure, and certainly not power. I will be authentic to that new human being, and I will work towards that and embrace the change and challenge that is a natural consequence of giving up my old self. This is my take on authenticity. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please remember, we've got 2 sponsors of the podcast that I would love for you to please check out to support them. And by doing so, you are also supporting the podcast. Cured Nutrition, my favorite product from them is their product called Zen. Cured Nutrition does excellent quality, high quality CBD products. I use this to help me sleep. It has been fantastic for me. And also Paleo Valley, my favorite meat sticks. These things are my go-to protein source. Make sure that I have them all around so that when I am needing a quick protein source to quell my hunger and decrease my cravings, this is my go-to. Cured Nutrition, Paleo Valley. Please check them out at the links associated with this podcast. Use the code NEXTLEVEL for a discount. And of course, I get a little bit of a kickback. Of course, Paleo Valley and Cured Nutrition get to sell their products, and you get to have a discount. It's a win-win-win, which is the kind of relationships that I love. Please check them out. Also, do me a favor, DM me, leave me a review, tell me what you want to cover. I really want to know what you think about this idea of authenticity. I know it's a little bit different than the way most people think about it, but let me know what you think about this. Give me a review on iTunes. I appreciate you all so much, and I will see you at the next podcast.